I'm Luca Giliberti, contributing writer at Gold Derby, and I'm excited to talk about the second season of The Morning Show with Emmy-nominated production designer Nelson Coates. Nelson, the second season was obviously a massive undertaking that introduced a number of new sets and locations, but I read that you, who boarded the show in the second season, were also asked to dial up and update pre-existing sets. So to start things off, could you elaborate on that a bit?
You bet. I talked with the cinematographers who'd worked on season one to find out where there are pitfalls and what they needed to help them do their work better. And of course, I've had a long association with Mimi Leader, who's producing director on the show, and she had some specific ideas as well. Some of those being well, the crazy thing about season two is we actually started and had been filming 3.5 weeks. And then we were the very first show to shut down for COVID. And so during that, the entire season got rewritten, and we only used a day and a half of that 3.5 weeks of filming because everything had changed. And so the goal for me was to really bring in a full complexity of New York City into the show. The first season felt very glass steel things, and there were I really wanted to get pre-war and lots of different neighborhoods and really have the audience understand where we were in Manhattan. And yet at the same time, after COVID, they decided that everything was going to get bigger and go around the world. So the initial sets that we addressed were not only to make them more functional and vibrant, but also to richen the colors and make it a little bit more ominous and bring the whole palette down. And in the morning show within a show itself, we changed the actual teacup area, the anchor area, with graphics and lighting, and brought that forward, added a conference room so you could do viewing and have scenes off to the side while the show is in progress or being set up, as well as a lot of niches for people to hide in or have side conversations, such as a large craft service type kitchen. So those were some things in that set. But because of the shutdown and no one wanting to go other places, we all of a sudden were creating all of UBA, and in 8.5 weeks built a 12,000 square foot set from scratch, from drawing to filming, that had offices and hallways and elevators and huge bullpens and things, just trying to expand the world, but also keep everyone safe in their pods and not having to go to downtown locations as much as possible. So getting that richness was really one of the goals for each of the sets that had pre-existed, and then as they grew into all the new environments.
That's fascinating, and 8.5 weeks is absolutely insane, but the results are impressive. So I think everything turned out. At the beginning of the season, we actually find Alex not in her usual living space, but in a cabin in Maine, where she is, living in a much quieter and more secluded life while she's writing a tell-all book on her career. So talk about creating the interior of that cabin and what it might imply or reveal about Alex's state of mind at that point in time.
We wanted to create a warm, cozy kind of retreat that was so opposite of what her life in New York was like, and almost like a cocoon where she was trying to regroup. And the idea of going to a cabin up in Maine in the snow, because it's that time of year, so that all she really can do is focus on writing her book and figuring out where she's going next. We actually found a residence that we augmented out in Calabasas, because again, we're filming this, we're filming the entire season where we go all over the world now, with everything from New Year's Eve in Times Square to Wuhan to Beijing to Milan and Lake Como. We were going everywhere, and so we're going to Maine, but we had to stay in Los Angeles County. So we found this place in Calabasas. We created the snow, we created the icicles and things, because obviously the temperature is not conducive to real icicles. So that's all created, and then creating a warm, enveloping environment for her with a beautiful central desk so that she could be fixated on all the elements of her life as she's doing self introspection.
Right. I mean, I certainly would like to live in that cabin. It looked very cozy. But to stay in the lane of character or circumstances being revealed through production design, I would like to touch on Laura Peterson, a new addition to the show, who comes in with such a rich backstory and such a clearly delineated personality. Are there any Easter eggs in her living space or in the design of her living space that reveal something about her or are just character based in general?
You bet. One of the things we talked about for the Laura Peterson character was that she was a Diane Sawyer-esque reporter, had great gravitas, knew who she was, didn't have to prove to other people, who she was by her space, and that she probably was on the Upper East Side, probably a mid-block townhome. Friends of mine who have mid-block townhomes have all moved their master suites down to the ground level and bust out the back walls so that they can have the garden access in those townhomes. We needed to make sure her space gave her the same weight as Alex's space in a whole different milieu. So in much the same way that Alex's penthouse was for show and really is almost posturing, Laura Peterson's is kind of the opposite. She knows who she is. She has the collections of elements from her reporting around the world. You have beautiful pieces from Thailand. You have things from France. You have the collections that kind of reveal aspects of her personality. And yet they're really about her and her enjoyment as opposed to bringing people into that space. And we had to also show that there was a level of architectural digest quality to this space so that you see that she has risen to a place in her career as well.
That's fascinating. And of course, Laura becomes Bradley's love interest. But what is really interesting about that relationship is that they both come from very different backgrounds and are in different places when it comes to embracing their sexual orientation. So how are there differences reflected in the respective designs of their living spaces?
Well, Bradley's space is a redo of a space from season one. She's still in a hotel environment, but again, we updated it and brought the walls darker, added a bar, added a whole wet bar area to it. Really created kind of a complexity there that was different than Laura's. Laura's, has the roaring fireplace, that's all stone from France. It has a lot of art that is very female centric without being overt, but it's definitely celebrating the female form. So you get that she is really comfortable with her sexuality and who she is. Bradley's art is very, we pushed it even more New York and more reserved and kind of almost commercial, so that there is lack of personality in her living space. So you can kind of see where she is at a odd juxtaposition.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely love those differences. And, before we actually move on to some of the bigger set pieces, I do also want to mention Corey's hotel suite, which you've called one of your favorite sets of the season because you were able to imbue it with so much subtext. So could you expand on that a bit?
Well, since we had the ability to bring in some more pre-war architecture, I wanted this to look like a presidential suite at an older hotel that had, the balustrades out the windows and the old gold gilding. But since the first season dealt so much with the whole sexual harassment aspect of this corporate workspace, I wanted to show the pervasiveness of the visuals that we're bombarded with all the time. So we designed some Lalique type light fixture sconces that have a nude male, nude female that are into columns over Corey's bed that we custom built, as well as a lot of the furniture for this space. We had a beautiful piece by the artist America Martin that is a reclining nude. And it doesn't feel like it's a personal space. It does feel like it is a high-end suite. So there is still a level of separation from his personal items of life, and yet it does feel very New York. It feels very dark and intriguing, and yet there's a lot of imagery. All the smalls are photographs of New York neighborhoods that I've taken, and everything was about giving either the sexual context or the New York underlevel of the Bowery and those areas.
That's great insight. Thank you so much. And of course, we have to talk about some of the bigger set pieces and about the show going global story-wise, but you being confined to the Los Angeles area to create this global landscape. So walk me through the process of recreating Wuhan and Beijing, or at least the parts of it that we get to see, in a way that didn't make it look like it was an obvious set piece, and doing this in the middle of a pandemic.
Well, since we knew we weren't traveling and we wanted to recreate kind of the feel of one of the CNN reporters that had gotten caught as he was reporting on the start of the pandemic and then barely made it out of Wuhan before the huge shutdown of many months. We wanted to have that almost breathlessness of having to race through a train station and dealing with the train and the barely ticking clock making it out of there. And Wuhan has, in real life, 3 different train stations. One is a big steel glass edifice. Another one is definitely something that is a holdover from the old colonial British kind of architecture. And then there was a fairly modern one that had 3 odd humps to the architecture, 3 kind of arches. And from my travels around Southern California, I knew that the Anaheim Metrolink station had at least one similar arch. And so it took a lot of negotiations with Metrolink to get not only access to the station, but also to the platform and a train with 8 cars. So we did a massive dress with ticket counters and all sorts of Chinese New Year decor, and redid all of the advertising and elements out on the little pavilions for trinkets and things out on the platform. And then because Metrolink would only allow us to fix the exterior of the train once it was actually at the station, we redressed the whole interiors at their substation, drove the train in as we were getting close to filming, and I had a whole team attacking each car with all the graphics and everything to make the Beijing, Guangzhou, Wuhan railways. And I'm pretty pleased with the result.
Oh, absolutely. The result is incredible. You would not believe that was not filmed over there, that it was in, the Los Angeles area. It's absolutely amazing. And that takes us to my final question, because there is the famous Lake Como, obviously, where we spend a lot of time this season. And Italy is a country that is famous for its distinctive architecture, its distinctive roads and look in general, which you couldn't circumvent because there are a ton of exterior scenes and shots. Yeah. So what went into transforming the locations that were available to you into Lake Como?
Well, having traveled to Milan and Lake Como and these areas, I knew how challenging this would be not to actually go there. So I pitched the whole directing team, producing team, the idea of using the only 2 cobblestone streets in all of LA, which is downtown, actually, near the Pico Union, the Pico House. And there's some Italianate steel construction there. And I did some pre-visualization concept drawings, as well as photoing of if we put a green screen here and if we did this element here and we added facades that would cover the brick, because there's really not any brick in Piazza Cavour, that we could create restaurants and things and have like 2.5 streets of views and be able to look all directions. Then it was a matter of getting the National Park Service, who owns this particular area and controls that, to get them on board. Then just basically it became a race to try to create and build things modularly enough that we could bring them in.
Mm-hmm.
Buildings that were in the distance that we did not get access to, we actually created photographs that looked like stores with the interiors dressed out on the sidewalks that we did have access to, and their entire windows had reflections and the whole interiors to them, and made it look like there was so much more going on. And just by modifying and creating particular signage, particular like green X for a pharmacia, the window dressings and the types of stores and the gelateria, everyone was really quite surprised that when you were on the streets, it really did feel like you were actually in Italy. And then, of course, there is the huge villa where Steve Carell is camped out in. And the pandemic created a very unusual situation for us in that there were several cities in Southern California that were not allowing filming at all during the pandemic, such as Beverly Hills and Pasadena, where a lot of larger mansions would be. But we found way on the outskirts beyond Pasadena, found in Sierra Madre a building that had been a house that had been built in 1926 by architect William Neff. And it supposedly was in the style of a building in Florence that Michelangelo had drawn and built. But it was now, had been willed to a school as an event center, and it was just stark white and not much in the way of landscaping. And so we came through, redid the entire interior, redid all the landscaping, put decomposed granite out on the drives and added to gates and gold gilding and things, and then figured out again our specific views for Lake Como, so that when Steve comes out of his bedroom, he's looking out at the water. And then in globally searching through Google Earth, finding a peninsula in the lake that we loved, and we found a site where we wanted to put that. So we LiDAR'd our building once it was all dressed and painted and finished, and then plopped it onto that peninsula. And it kind of created a great effect. A lot of real artifacts, things that are not from prop houses, to populate the inside of the house. So it looked like years and years of a family. You have the flat screen TV, but you have a tube TV off to the side because we're so rich. Well, we don't really need to replace that. So there's lots of layers in the house. There's Roman pieces. There's pieces that from the art to the furniture that really feel more Eurocentric as opposed to American.
Right. I mean, I got to tell you, it was all very believable, even down to the motorcycles or mopeds on the streets. I thought that was such a great detail. Nelson, thank you so much for walking me through your creative process today. It was very fascinating, and it was a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you. So nice to meet you. Thank you as well.